Get ready for the kickoff of Coach Red and Company. An inside look at high school athletics like you've never heard before. Hosted by veteran coaches Red Johnston and Shane Huygens. This podcast dives deep into the world of high school sports, exploring much more than scores and stats. Coach Red and Company is your go-to podcast for the developments beyond the X's and O's of high school sports. Red and Shane are tackling the big topics like NIL, recruiting, team dynamics, and even the dollars and cents behind the game, such as budgets, facilities, and coaching salaries. Let's talk high school sports. Real, raw, and unfiltered. This is Coach Red and Company. Touchdown!
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Coach Red and Company. I'm your host, Coach Red, along with our co-host, Coach Shane. Today's episode, the state of high school sports. We're going to be talking about high school sports, kind of where we are in the country, participation, NIL, recruiting, just kind of touch on a little bit of everything. We also have a nice interview with the executive director of the Florida High School Athletic Association, Mr. Craig Damon, coming up in a few minutes. Got a lot of great insight from him on where he thinks the state of high school sports in Florida are, and a few other topics that we talked about as well. So that's coming up. But right now, Coach, welcome to the show. You know, you can tell these Midwestern guys, man, he looks like the offensive coordinator for the Vikings with his Iowa
Monday
hat.
night,
Might have to get me some gear somewhere.
Hopefully by the time you see this, the Vikes will have whooped the Rams and we'll be moving on in the playoffs. Yeah. Pray for me, please. It's been 50 years of pain and anguish.
Hey, man, I don't know how y'all turned Sam Darnold around, man, but
I don't know,
he's done a hell of a job.
I know we can't pay him too much, that's for sure, but we'll figure it out. Hey, great episode today. The interview with Craig Damon, A1A. That's like the head guy in charge here in Florida. To get him on our first podcast, that tells you where we're heading with this podcast, people.
You know, this all came about, guys, is, you know, everybody does podcasts or different things about stats and scores and rankings. I wanted, and talking with Coach Shane, wanted to give everybody information on what goes in and around high school athletics other than scores and statistics. Yeah, we're going to touch on that. We'll talk about, you know, different high school 5-star recruits, 4-star recruits, who's doing this or that. But the main thing is we want to talk about everything that goes on at that high school that you don't get to talk about, that you're not talking about. Transfers, NIL, coaching, officiating, everything that goes into high school athletics, we're going to kind of touch on. And if you have a topic that you want us to touch on, or you have comments, leave them below on our YouTube channel. We'll get to them and get back to you. To kick this one off, I wanted to talk a little bit about our participation numbers. I did some deep diving with the NFHS, which is the National Federation of High Schools. That's where all 50 federations or high school associations send their participation numbers. They send everything to them. This is the group that creates all the high school rules and publications for basketball, football, you name it. They come out with all the rules, the rule changes, uniform rules. And so getting information from them back in 21-22, it was interesting to see that we had 7,857,969 participants in high school sports, which was an increase of about 240,000 over the year before, up 3% over the 21-22 school year. If you want to break that down, boys and girls, about 4.5 million for boys, 3.3 million for girls in those years. The following year, in the 23-24 season, we exceeded over 8 million participants were involved in the school, which was up 210,000. So the previous record was 7,980,886 set in 2017-18. That total included 4.6 million boys, 3.4 million girls. So that marked the biggest increase since the 17-18 school year, but also, you know, obviously up over the 2 years that we had the pandemic. I know here in the state of Florida, we were blessed to be an open state and our kids got to play. My daughters were playing high school volleyball at the time. So I know how big that was for them to be able to play, where a lot of students in a lot of states weren't able to play because their state was shut down. So to see those numbers, some of the biggest gains are actually in wrestling, women's wrestling, flag football for the ladies is a huge increase. And even in boys, obviously football, basketball, soccer are some of the leading sports for both boys and girls, usually in the top 3 or 4. They had 17,473 additional girls in the 22-23 school year. And, girls wrestling, if you haven't seen it, it's crazy. My daughter comes
intense.
Our youngest daughter, who's kind of a diva, hair, nails, makeup, the pretty girl, she came to me and my wife and goes, "Hey, I want to try out for wrestling." And we're like, you
understand what the wrestling room smells like?
Oh man. So, our oldest daughter was a senior that year and we let her go to the tryout, but with all the money we invested in volleyball, we're like, hey, wait a minute, this is probably not going to work for you just because we can't afford to get you hurt during club season. Trying to get you a college scholarship. So luckily she wasn't as good at it right off the bat as the little one was. The little one kind of picked it up. She was a sophomore at the time, wrestled her sophomore and junior year. And man, hey, I saw a different side to my daughter, competitive side, that you don't see a lot in volleyball. Volleyball, some girls are real intense, but a lot of them, it's a lot of laughing and joking and smiling after points. And
it's a team sport too. And wrestling is strictly, it's a team, but it's like baseball. It's an individual within a team sport.
Right. And when I saw her lose and I tried to go say something to her, she buzzed right by me, didn't want to say anything. She had to go kind of calm down and bring herself down and get, back within herself. But, that's great to see all the different opportunities that the young ladies are having and the different sports that we're trying to get them into. Now. I know even with the guys, flag football is huge. So,
well, and here in Florida as well, you got to remember, I was speaking with a gentleman the other day. He's from Syracuse, and obviously Syracuse is like the birthplace of lacrosse. Jim Brown, that's a legendary lacrosse. And if you live in the Northeast, lacrosse is big.
Yep.
Well, down here, lacrosse private schools, but I don't know a whole lot. I don't know a ton of public schools that have lacrosse yet, or maybe they do now.
Yeah, they do.
I think it's becoming lacrosse is kind of becoming a bigger sport as well, right, Coach Red?
It is. They had an initiative in Orange County when I was the athletic director, 07 to 10 at Oak Ridge, and even the 15-16 school year I was at, they were putting in lacrosse, and even in some of the inner city schools that lacrosse is,
it's really
a little bit more affluent type sport.
Yeah.
They were having coaches come in from other schools and coach for a year to kind of get the kids interested in it, teach them the game before they actually put the sport in place the following year. So not sure. We'd have to do a little research with Orange County Public Schools to find out what schools have it. But I think a majority of the schools have lacrosse now. So that's definitely a big one.
And it's great. It's great that that the schools are offering so many sports. I mean, obviously, me and you being sports guys, we understand the value of playing sports. Like I consider sports like a microcosm of life in general.
Oh, without a doubt.
Like and it's been proven. You see the ads for NCAA about how many guys go professional in their sport and how many people hire former college players because they understand those college guys, those college ladies, they come with a work ethic. They come with a team concept. They understand what winning is. They know how to compete. Like your daughter, like you said about your daughter. Competition is key in life. Nobody gives you a job. Right. Like I tell people all the time, Coach Red isn't getting the AD of Oak Ridge just because they like him. He had to beat out a couple people to become the AD at Oak Ridge. Right. You're not becoming the top salesman at your pharmaceutical company by just knocking on a couple doors. You got to beat out Johnny and Susie and whoever else to become that spot. So you got to learn how to compete. And for them to create other sports that are allowing kids to play is I mean, that's super important. 8 million people. And that probably, to be honest with you, I'm guessing, Coach Red, that probably doesn't even consist of some of the schools that maybe don't play in state associations.
Correct.
Like here in Florida, we have the SIAA. IMG plays in a non-league. You know, they're not state sanctioned by the FHSAA. So I don't even know if those get thrown into those numbers.
Right.
So the number could even be a little higher. But 8 million, it's a good number to see.
Yeah. And, you know,
I like that it's growing, right? I like that it's growing and not declining. Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. You know, just giving kids the opportunity. And, you know, the neat thing when we were overseas in Vietnam and China for those 5 years, education is number one over there, right? I mean, it's doctors, lawyers,
100%.
accountants,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Professional thing. And as the athletic director and basketball coach, to try to get parents in those cultures to understand the benefit that athletics have that will help them in their pursuit of being a doctor or lawyer or whatever it was. You know, there's a huge benefit to it, you know, and luckily, you know, we were able to convince some parents and, you know, but there's some cultural things.
I'm sure that was challenging.
You know,
right?
it was definitely challenging. There's
because they're saying, hey, if his grades drops from an A+ to an A, he's out of here.
Right.
You're like, holy cow, he's like a 4.6 already.
But kids would leave our school after practice. They would go to another school, maybe, you know, work on a different language or work on, you know, something else. You know, these kids academically were focused, and, you know, you were fighting some things that was interesting in Vietnam. Some of our soccer girls, a lot of them would wear long sleeve shirts. They didn't want to, you know, get tanned because in those cultures, if you had tan skin, that was a sign of being like a manual laborer outside. And they would have whitening creams. They would have a little different mindset.
Interesting.
Being overseas. But, you know, just giving kids opportunities to play. And I read this report from the NFHS that said, you know, a majority of kids that play high school sports play because they want to have fun with their friends. You know,
they love the game. They want to hang out with friends.
And
100%.
I think they learn so much, and they have no idea that they're learning it. And that's the really cool part.
It's like when my older son used to play baseball here at Dr. Phillips Little League, and he'd say, "Dad, I don't think I want to play this year," and there was no option. I'm like, "Oh no, we're going to play. Don't worry, you're going to like it." And then a week into practice, guess what? He got 4 new friends, and he's like, "Dude, I love it." And that's, you know, as adults, sometimes we got to make those decisions, and we don't let an 8-year-old tell us he's not going to play when we know the benefits of you're going to meet friends, you're going to enjoy yourself. And as you said, I think, like you said, most kids play, and I'm a small town Iowa boy in the Midwest. You're small town. You play because, first of all, there is not enough kids to play if you don't play.
Right.
And second, all your boys are playing. So on a Friday night, who are you going to hang out with?
Right.
There's nobody to hang out with because they're playing basketball. So you go play basketball.
Yep.
It is what it is. And like you said, what you learn from sports, what you learn and you don't even know you learned.
Yep.
You don't know it till, like my son now, he's 27, and he still tells me quotes, or he still tells me, "Dad, Ben always says," he always remembers that talk you gave us, because I coached him in Pop Warner football here in Dr. Phillips. "Ben always remembers that talk you gave him about this or about that." He remembers that stuff. At the time, it probably didn't change anything about him at the time. But now he's 27, and he remembers something I told him when he was 16 on the football field.
Right.
Probably doesn't remember blank of the stuff I told him as a dad.
Right.
But he remembers what I told him as a coach.
Yeah, and
that's crazy. It's funny when I said, "Dude, what are you doing, man? You're becoming the old guy in the room and you're 27.
Exactly.
What's happening here, man?"
And it's neat to see that they finally, you know, kids finally get it after so many years. And, you know, when you have former players come back, "Oh, coach, you said this," and I was like, that was me. You know.
Yeah, and the coaches, the role models you are to those students and the life lessons you teach them as a coach. I mean, the kids, I had a young man, "Hey, can you write me a letter? I'm trying to become an officer in the Air Force. They need a letter of recommendation."
Yeah.
I was like, man, for that kid to reach out to me, out of all the people in the world he could reach out to, he thinks his JV coach from Dr. Phillips High School is going to have some pull.
Yeah.
Like, I ain't got no pull, but I appreciate you thinking I have pull.
You know,
and I'll write a nice and I'll write you a nice letter up. Don't worry about it. And I did. And guess what? He's an officer. So,
you know, I think people understand coaches and what they bring to the table. And, you know, you spend so much time with these kids that you know them, right? You know their work ethic, you know, when they're trying to slack off. And, so, I think people, when they come and ask for those kind of recommendations, the people that read them, I think truly understand that, okay, this is a coach. He understands, like a former boss. So I had the pleasure of sitting down with Craig Damon, the executive director of the Florida High School Athletic Association, to talk about, his ideas of where high school sports are. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Then Coach Shane and I will come back and talk about some of the things that we discussed and a few other things. Here's the interview. We have the distinct pleasure to be able to sit down with the executive director of the Florida High School Athletic Association, Mr. Craig Damon. We want to thank him and his staff for all the help that they've given us to help start this podcast. And first, welcome, Craig. Thank you for sitting down and taking time out of your busy schedule. We know we're finishing up a lot of the fall state championships. It's a busy time of year, obviously, for the FHSAA. So thank you. Kind of give us some insight into kind of where you guys see the state of high school athletics right now.
High school athletics right now. We are almost in the middle of the school year, finishing up our fall sports. Winter sports are underway, which some of our winter sports will actually start district tournaments when we come back in January. But right now, high school sports, we're trying to stay on top of things and keep things as level as we possibly can, with kids having opportunities that they have today, unlike any other opportunities that kids have had in the past with the NIL and some of the other things that kids are able to take advantage of today. We're just trying to stay on top of it, make sure we understand state statutes, make sure kids have an opportunity to participate at the appropriate schools and to take advantage of what high school sports can, the value that it can add to their lives.
When we talk about, high school sports, obviously I coached for 20 plus years. A lot of it as an assistant in the FHSAA, and a couple years as a head coach. Talk about the value of education-based athletics to young people.
Education-based athletics is, that is where you want your young kids involved in. The thing that we have to remember is sometimes people put the athlete before the student, and sports seems to be the focus, but it's an extension of the classroom. And a lot of times that's not always portrayed or perceived out in the public, that, athletics is here and education is there. It's not. Athletics is an extension of the classroom. The same things that you need to be successful in the classroom are the same things that make you successful in the field. Being disciplined, practicing and getting it right at practice, whether you have to do it 10 times, 1,000 times, or whatever, until you get it perfect. If we can convince our athletes to carry those same characteristics into the classroom, it will allow our students to be very successful. When you talk about being a student athlete, please remember that the student part becomes first, and all those things that athletics, supposed to teach you, that life lessons and so forth, as a former coach, the discipline, the perseverance, the camaraderie, the collaboration, all those things, those are the same things that help make you successful as a student.
I've always said athletes teaches you things about life, and they're going to help you in life that you're not going to get in the classroom. In half the time you don't even know you're learning those things. Coach is pushing you to work hard, to run extra, or to push yourself in the weight room. He's teaching you those things that you really don't understand until later in life, when you start doing it in the workplace or in your family or, in your church or wherever, So I really believe in athletics and high school sports and how they prepare young people for the future. So.
And to even add a little bit more on that, I was having a conversation with someone at our football finals last week in Miami, and the athletic field is probably one of the only places throughout society in our world today where everybody's on a level playing field. Doesn't matter what socioeconomic status, background you come from, what your race is, how much money. Those things it doesn't matter. When you're on the team together, you're all fighting or bonding together for a common cause, and it doesn't matter what house you live in, whether you're poor, you're rich, black, white. Those things doesn't matter. It's all about the team and playing for that team and coming together. There's 11 kids on the football field, 5 on the basketball court, with a common goal and trying to achieve that goal.
And I think with a lot of the politics today and the divisiveness that's out there in the world, that's where I love being around high school sports and seeing that. And you can see it on every sideline you go to.
Yes.
Like you said, rich, poor, black, white, Hispanic, doesn't matter. We're all in it
Yes.
for one goal. So thank you. Obviously, with college, I really think it starts in the pros where guys trying to, switch teams to create these super teams. Kind of now that comes down into college athletics with the portal. Thousands of football players now this time of year are looking to get in the portal because they're not getting the playing time that they think they deserve, or, whatever reasons they want to transfer. It's starting to trickle down into the high schools. And I know, you can talk a little bit more about transfers. Our numbers, and before we did the interview, I was talking to a young lady in the eligibility department, and we're kind of on pace this year for the 24-25 season to double the number of transfers that took place in the 23-24 season.
Well, and it's possibly just the fact that we're tracking a little bit better than we have in the past, and which makes it better. But school choice, that's there. That's been around since 2015, where kids had the opportunity to choose various schools to go to based on what their parents and the students felt was the best education opportunity for them. That was the intent of the law when that was put in place. However, that's not always the way it's applied. Some of our students are looking for an athletic advantage as opposed to the full school experience that the law was intended to do. But it's here. The days when I grew up in the 80s, 87 graduate, you went to your own school. You didn't even dare think about wearing the colors of someone across town. That was like taboo. You'd rather go 0-10 in your school colors than to be 10-0 in the neighboring school. Those are just the way they are. Times have changed, and was told by some of our mentors, either you evolve or you become extinct. We've had to evolve with some of the rules and regulations we have here at the association to be in alignment with state statute and what the current trend is. The trend is now, parents have the option to try to find the best educational opportunity for their sons or daughters, and in doing so, it has caused kids to transfer a little bit more. I think in today's world, with the ability to transfer, kids just trying to find the right fit, trying to find the right educational opportunity for them, but also athletically. And hopefully it'll get to a point where it levels off. I hope that at one point in time, our schools all have the same thing to offer. Whether it's from an academic standpoint or athletic standpoint, we're pretty much offering the same things where transfers are not as big of a deal. But, when you think about transfers, and it's something that, when we go to our national conferences and talk with other state associations and hear how they're doing things, Florida's very unique. In some states, most of the states, if you transfer and you don't make a full and complete move, you're ineligible in every sport that you played in the previous year for a year until you establish residency there. Those times are changing in some of those states. They're slowly working towards this legislation and stuff in place that will bring school choice to some of those states. But however, in Florida, we've been doing that for a while now, and our kids are used to it. Our parents are used to it. Some of our parents are just as knowledgeable as some of our staff members because they've researched the bylaws and the statutes and so forth, so they have a pretty good understanding of it. But
how much does our state legislature depend on you guys at the FHSAA, or do they call and say, hey, this is something that we're looking to do as far as school choice? How is that going to affect athletics? Or do they even do that?
I can only speak from my 3 years here, as executive director. I can't. The years before, I'm not sure if there was communication with our executive directors, our previous executive directors. When I took the job, actually before I took the job, I was in charge of eligibility and compliance. And part of my job dealt with dealing with the legislative side. So I tried to go to different meetings and committee meetings and so forth to hear and learn as much as I could. Consulting with our lobbyists, tried to go by and meet various legislators to say, hey, I'm Craig Damon, I'm here to try to help out anywhere I can. So I have formed a relationship with some. For example, Senator Corey Simon, and I played at Florida State, played in the NFL. He's a guy that, has reached out to me multiple times. And, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? We're looking at this. How will that impact you? So I'm hoping to expand some of those relationships now in the role that I'm in now, where I am the executive director of the association, to almost ask, like, okay, what's the end goal? Where are we trying to get to? And then seeing if I can be support or catalyst in helping to reach that goal by, okay, if you're trying to get here, here's some wording that we can properly govern and manage, with our membership, but it also gets the results that you want. So that's sort of the approach that I've been trying to take with our lobbyists and trying to get in front of as many of our legislators as possible, building those relationships with folks and letting them know that, number one, we care about kids. We're not out to do anything that's just punitive or any ill will or intent towards any school or any student. However, we want to try to create a level playing field for all our kids. So those are things I try to emphasize when I do have an opportunity to speak with the legislator, that, hey, we are here for the kids. I've spent 20 years in public education as a coach. So a lot of kids today that have gone off, and, had one of my former football players, linebacker, started linebacker for me that was actually one of the security details for Vice President Kamala Harris. Oh, wow. So got to travel with her and so forth. And, coming from a little small town like Reddick, little four-way stop, no traffic lights, very rural, about as rural as you can get, to see him, through playing sports, applying himself in the classroom, going and playing, at a Division II university, playing football there, getting his degree, got into law enforcement, and now, he's with Secret Service. Those type things as a coach, those relationships you build with those kids, and the fact every time they see you, you still refer to as coach, yep. Even though I hadn't coached in 14 years. Those type of relationships are great.
I don't know if the legislators foresaw the types of transfers. I know in Orlando we have, kids that drive over an hour every day to come to school. And I know it's athletically based, unfortunately, whether it's to try to play with your friends or play with a better coach or a better team or something. Talk a little bit about, kind of, I guess, the insight that the FHSAA can provide the legislators on those types of consequences. And then we'll talk about NIL in a couple minutes, but is that school choice? Could a kid come across, state boundaries now to go to a school because we have NIL and an adjoining state doesn't have NIL?
And that was one of the things that, wanted to push last year when NIL this year went into effect here in Florida, was we didn't want our kids to cross over to go to Georgia, go to other states that did allow NIL. So it was important that we did come up with something that would allow our students opportunity to capitalize off NIL. As far as the transfers and so forth with students, again, I think part of the intent of allowing school choice was to help make our schools academically more competitive with each other, to raise the bar a little bit where it wasn't just doing the same thing we've always done for years and years without benefiting our students. So with school choice, it's forced some school districts to step up to the plate and increase their academic rigor in the courses that they offer and so forth. So the intent was great, and I think it will benefit kids greatly. However, I think last year was an example of unintended consequences from the ability to transfer around, where we had 3 football players that played on one school for 9 weeks. The school had a policy that if you violated that policy, they would ask you to unenroll from the school. Student athlete violated that policy during week 9 at practice, ended up having to unenroll. 2 teammates felt strongly about that student, so they unenrolled as well. They sought out schools that would allow them to transferred into that school, sat out the 5 days that's required, and on the 6th day participate with the schools. Kids played 9 games with one team, and I actually played against the school that they transferred to during the regular season, transferred to that school, missed the 10th game of the season, but joined that team in the playoffs. And we got several phone calls because I think some of our legislators didn't realize that it would allow a kid to join a team for the playoffs. But right now there's no parameters with it. So technically a kid could play with their team and lose the first or second round of the playoffs, sit out a week, miss the 3rd week of the playoffs, or transfer to a school, miss the 3rd week of the playoffs, and join a team for, throughout the rest of the playoff systems. Those are some of the things that there's been some discussion about. Again, Senator Simon and I, we've had conversations about that and trying to find a way to sort of put some parameters on it, where we definitely want to keep school choice in place, where parents have the option, of providing a better school or enrolling their kids in a better school from an academic standpoint, or whatever that they feel is best for them. Ever the implications that it may have on teams in the playoffs, trying to find a way to have a balance where that school choice is still there, but there are some regulations where a kid, you can't just lose with a team, week 3 of the playoffs, sit out in the semifinal game and play in the state championship with another team.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but the way it's set up, I could play football at school A, transfer to school B, play basketball, transfer to school C, run track or play baseball if I sit out those 6 days and haven't started practice.
That is correct. And even before the state statute changed to allow pretty much open transfer and get rid of all our transfer rules, our bylaws and policies back 2013, 2014 allowed that. It just said you had to transfer to the school before the start of the sports season. So I could be a football player and want to play at school A and want to play basketball at school B. I would literally quit football before basketball started, transfer to school B, play basketball up until time for baseball, so right before baseball season start, and then transfer to school C and play baseball. Now it'll allow a kid to finish football without having to quit early, and as long as they don't start basketball at school A, they can transfer to school B and play basketball all through basketball season until its completion. As long as they don't start baseball at school B, transfer to school C and play baseball.
Times are changing.
They're changing. And the things with like that, thinking about my high school days as a student athlete, I formed a relationship with my coaches over a 4-year span, and one of my coaches, my baseball coach, was like a second dad to me. Even to this day, when there's tough decisions that I need to make, he's the first person I call. And he's that resource for me. We try to talk periodically, don't talk as much as we should, and I take blame for that, but he's that one person that I always sought when I needed advice on tough situations. And the fact, when you think about where kids are today, do they ever get a chance to develop those deep relationships with the coach where, it's almost like a father figure where somebody I can go to get advice that's going to give me the advice I need to hear,
right,
not what I want to hear,
exactly,
type deals. That's one of the things I feel blessed of being a part of those systems that I'm not sure if the kids of today always get that.
Yeah. As a coach, I've been blessed to have some of those relationships where kids call me, Coach, I'm thinking of doing this, or Coach, I'm thinking of doing that. What are your thoughts? We give them the best advice we can, like a father or a mentor, and ultimately it's up to them. But just to know that you've had that little bit of impact on a young man or young woman's life, to be able for them to trust in you and to come back to you. So kind of want to move into recruiting now, kind of transfers and recruiting. Obviously, it's been well documented of a school that had 30 young men transfer in last year, which to me is an exorbitant amount. I think 4, 5, 6 guys transferring here or there. That's kind of typical. But when you have, that many young people transferring in, obviously it was to play sports, especially the distance of some of the young people crossing county lines coming in. What kind of red flags does that send up to the FHSAA and others that, okay, it's not just a transfer, but there's got to be some kind of recruiting issues or violations going on there?
We're not naive to know that recruiting is going on here in the state of Florida. The issue for us is just proving it. And sometimes it's for example, I talked with my board last year about the change of semester, which I'm waiting to do at our February board meeting. As soon as football season's over and the first semester's done, there's an Instagram account that I typically follow, and it lists every kid that transfers that share with that platform that they're transferring to, taking their talents to a new school. And so last year I was tallying it up, and there was several schools that 25, 26 kids from, let's say, I think I started looking at it maybe the second or third week of January, so about a 3-week span between the third week of January and the second week of February, where 25, 27 kids were coming in to school. Wow. I mean, and there was probably 20 or more transfers in just the sport of football. Only. There were 20 or more transfers into, because I was charting them by school, 6 or 7 schools.
Wow.
And the thing is, that you can see the smoke, but it's trying to find the fire.
There's fire.
Yeah.
Exactly. And guys that have been in it long enough know that's not school choice transfers.
No, that's not.
That's not, oh, they have a better magnet program or they have this type of program that I'm going to. It's definitely for an athletic advantage, or what they perceive as an athletic advantage that may help them get to the next level.
And if I could add, there's some schools out there right now that hit those 20 transfers in that we feel pretty strongly, don't know for a fact, but feel pretty strongly that there's no ill intent by the school. It's just the success of the program. Seeing that their kids, they win, their kids go to college, they have great facilities and so forth, where kids are basically throwing themselves at these schools. So we know of those 8 or so, okay, these schools here, they've done it for so long, their reputation is what attracts folks. There's nothing being done by the people at the school. However, we also know that there are some that are trying to establish programs that know that there may be something done to entice them, but again, having the evidence to move forward with anything.
And I can't remember how long ago this rule was in place, but you guys had a rule, and of course, being a basketball coach, I followed it, that if an AAU coach took a head coaching position or assistant coaching position at a school, the kids from his AAU team could not follow him. If they did, they had to sit a year. Mm-hmm. Whatever happened to that rule?
We had to follow the coach rules. So if coach left and changed schools, kids couldn't follow him over there. And we had the, I can't remember how was it called? Contact affiliation with non-school teams, where it was a non-school team and, AAU team, whatever, you coach kids on the team, they couldn't come within a year without separation, so forth. Back in 2014, 15, when all the legislative things went in with transfers, became statute, it completely wiped away all our transfer regulations. So right now, the Florida High School Athletic Association, only regulations we have with transfers is what's in state statute.
Being around Florida for so long, I know that people have challenged through lawsuits with you guys, and there's been a lot of issues with people wanting their kids or their friends' kids, and they may know a legislator and they get in their ear, and so it's not easy sitting in your chair. I know it, and I commend you for all that you guys do for the FHSAA. And what can we do from the FHSAA standpoint or from a coaching standpoint to help limit recruiting?
It's difficult. If you know something, say something. I mean, there's lots of times I'll get a phone call or I'm at a game and a coach walks to me, man, I know so-and-so recruited my kid. I saw the text message. I'm like, okay, can you share it with me? No, I'm not going to. I don't want to get involved. I'm like, okay, if you don't want to get involved, if I don't have no evidence, then I really don't have a case. I just know that it's speculation.
It's hearsay, yeah.
Hearsay.
Yeah.
And I need physical evidence. And a lot of times, so we'll get phone calls, we'll get those conversations at a game or at a clinic or out in the mall somewhere, somebody comes to you, I know they recruited my kid, but won't turn over the evidence. And it's like, okay, well, without evidence, I don't have anything I can do anything with. Right. And, for the situations that we have been successful with proven recruiting, there's been someone that's been willing to step up and say, listen, I'm tired of this happening. At the end of the day, when a kid is recruited to a school or transfers into a school, there's another kid on the other side of it that's been working their butt off for 2, 3, 4 years, 1, 2, or 3 years, waiting on an opportunity to become a starter, or may have been a starter, or so forth, and somebody comes in and take that opportunity away from them. Or for some instances, they don't even make the team now because, for example, sport like basketball or some of our smaller sports where the roster spot is a little bit limited. 3 or 4 kids, 5 kids transfer in that sport, and now kids has been going to the school, that live in the neighborhood, and that have done all the things. Their tax dollars are going in there to the school for FT funding and so forth. They're taking up an artificial kid, for example, could be taking up a roster spot when there's no FT funding coming into that school, but yet they're taking a spot away from a kid that has been loyal, been going to that school forever. I understand the opportunity with kids being able to transfers and so forth, but on the unintended consequence from that is sometimes just taking a spot from a kid that's been at that school that has been working and doing their best to do everything they can do for that time, their opportunity, and someone comes in and take that opportunity away from them. And that's the other side that sometimes that gets lost in the conversations about those kids that miss out on opportunities.
I think a majority of the coaches do it the right way. Mm-hmm. I think they work with what they get, and that's one thing I love and admire about high school coaches is you have to fit your system around what shows up. Unfortunately, with recruiting, some guys try to go out and recruit players to fit their system, But most coaches get to change things up and say, hey, all right, I'm going to be a pressing team this year because I got some athletes. Well, next year, all we got's a bunch of, guys that can play zone because we don't have those athletes that can get up and down the floor. In the college world, you can recruit talent, but you can't recruit chemistry.
Correct.
The kids come in from all over, and it's tough. That's one of the toughest parts of coaching is getting 12 or 50 or 60, depending on what sport you're in, to buy into, here's our vision. We're going to all buy in. We're all going to pull for each other. And, when kids have different agendas or parents have different agendas, it's tough to do. Let's talk about officials, Craig. Integral part of the game. I did it for 7 years on the basketball side. What's the FHSAA doing to kind of help recruit officials or, retain the good officials that we have?
Number one, work with the National Federation. The National Federation has created various campaigns to try to attract officials from a marketing standpoint. There's commercials, there's stuff on social media, which tries to entice or encourage folks that may have an interest in officiating to come be a part of the association. So there's a direct number that actually, or an email that sends someone's interested to come straight to our office, and then we can get in touch with that person. So that's one thing. Several school districts across the state have implemented officials programs during the school day as elective courses. Olympia High School, I think, is one of them, which has 2 classes of about 30, and those kids learn the different rules about officiating, and actually some have taken on officiating at the middle school level and some of the rec leagues as a part-time job. So on a Saturday, they can go and work soccer games or baseball games, basketball games for probably half the day and make more money that one day than they'll make working at a McDonald's or somewhere all week long. So that's one of the things. As far as association, what I've done this year, for the first time, like I said, I've been here since 2013. We've always talked about there's been a shortage of officials, how to retain officials, how do we recruit officials and so forth. And it's been an issue, but we never done anything to, in my opinion, to invest more into it. This year, actually at the end of last year, I decided that we're going to create an officials department. Ray Hernandez, he was brought on several years ago as that person that will work with officials. We lost a staff member, and then he took on sport. And then I think as of 2 years ago, he had 2 sports, but was supposed to also be in charge of officials. So trying to juggle 2 sports, he had a fall sport, which was volleyball, and then he had a spring sport, and then officials in the middle. Well, we need somebody for officials full time. Justin Harrison has been with the association 15 plus years and so forth, was in charge of athletics for a long time, moved over to eligible and compliance for 2 years. When he heard me talking about putting somebody in charge of the officials program, he came to me and asked me, he would like to do it because he had already worked with officials partially when he was in athletics, but felt there would be a neat challenge for him. So Justin does nothing now. His only responsibility is to work with officials, where he goes out to Officials Association meetings and he, interacts with officials. So at our state championship events, he's there to work with officials. But he got somebody that, instead of Robbie, for example, at football, who's also in charge of football with our member schools, trying to talk to the officials and doing both. Robbie just concentrated on the schools, and Justin took care of the officials.
With officials, I think in every job there is, or in coaching, or you're always trying to get better. How do you see education playing a part in officials? How do we get officials better at what they do?
Get them on the court or on the field. You got to be out there, with plays and so forth that going on around you. So as many opportunities as there are with clinics and so forth, where there's actually contests taking place. That's the way. Last year, I think we subscribed to the National Federation in a different manner, where now all of our officials have access to the network, so they can go back and watch film and study film. So to me, it's no different than being a football coach or a basketball coach, where you study the film to make yourself better, find your shortcomings and try to work on things to improve, and do those same things with your players and your team. Officials can do the same thing. They can look at other officials officiating the game and say, that guy wasn't in the right position to make that call, or this should have been called instead of that. Or even, to me, I've always tried to study myself. Because you look at other people and you're going to second guess them, but looking at yourself and having the ability to internally, assess yourself, I think that's great. So a tool Justin has shared with the officials is like, hey, just have somebody set a camera up in the gym, or we're on the field, or ask the whole school, hey, can you give me a copy of the film? I want to get better. And I know as a coach, if the crew that's working my game asked for a copy of the film so they can get better, I would give it to them in a heartbeat, as quick as I could, because if they feel that it's that important that they get better, then it's only going to make my games, or make me feel that more confident in them on the field. So those are ways that I think from an education standpoint, our officials can get better.
Film don't lie.
It doesn't lie.
Film don't lie. And, that's what I always thought. We have evaluators and some associations that go out and evaluate these officials, but I think, getting in the mirror and working on your hand gestures. When I was a young official 100 years ago, that's what they told us. Get in front of a mirror, work on, they always wanted your hand here, and I know it changes a little bit now with numbers can go above 5, so you got to use 2 hands. But, there's things that I think these guys can do, obviously I'm not in the shape I was in as an official now, but I understand the importance. You're part of the game. Some of these guys need to, maybe work on their athleticism a little bit more, get in the gym and kind of work out. A guy always told me, he goes, we're always officiating 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. They never change. We get a year older every single year.
Correct.
And, I know guys that love to be around the game that have been doing it a while, and education's a part of it, getting better is a part of it, but also, staying in shape. And
that's one of the things that Justin and I, we've talked about. Some of our officials that's been doing it for years and getting up in age, trying to have a conversation with them to help them see the value of them being mentors as opposed to being on the field. Bringing those younger guys up, because a lot of times in the past, some of our older officials have wanted to still be a part of being on the field, being a part of the game, and it sort of hindered some of the younger officials from getting an opportunity. Yep. And it's like, to me, maybe my time has passed for me to get a state championship game, but what I can do is mentor a younger guy. Now that guy gets a championship game, and I feel like I'm just as much a part of that championship game because I helped that guy get to that point.
Negative part of officiating, fans.
It is at an all-time worst. It doesn't matter what state of the country you're in now. When I talk with other executive directors, it's at all-time worst as far as just physical abuse. I mean, it used to just be the verbal part. Now you hear seem like every other month about in some state where a fan has put their hands on an official and physically attacked them. So we've tried to, share with our officials, if you see a confrontation coming, try to step away to avoid it as much as possible. Try to de-escalate the situation. Always know where your resource officers are. Always know where the administrator on duty is, so that when you see those things coming, you can try to remove yourself from those situations. However, sometimes there's not the opportunity, but we've tried to share with officials, it is state law, that statute, that if you get physically abused, it's against the law, so you can press charges. And I think it's going to take some officials pressing charges when they are physically abused and it getting out in the public, like some of the other stories where folks understand that, listen, that's not going to be tolerated and so forth. And we try to also be proactive with our member schools anytime we have a chance to talk with them, in that they know their fans better than anybody else. Yep. And you know who your hotheads are and so forth. And a lot of times it just takes you walking close to them, and they'll sort of pipe down a little bit, as opposed to standing across the gym or across the field and sitting there and letting them listen to them yell and scream and get worse. And until official says something, you don't even act on it. So being proactive, knowing who your fans are that could possibly create an issue for you, and when you see it, addressing it early. Those are the type things that we try to share with our member schools to help out.
Social media, I mean, you could pull up, official abuse, and it's everywhere.
All the time.
Right, and I think, we have to do a better job as society. We're here for the kids. It's all kind of pieces to the puzzle. The coaches, the players, and the fans. Without the fans, we don't have a great atmosphere. The officials got to, control the game to the best of their ability, and the coaches coach to the best of their ability. And coaches lead by example. Yep. When I coach, my kid didn't say a word to the official. Yep. Sometimes I got out of line. I definitely donated some money to the FHSAA during my coaching career. But as we get older, we look back and we understand that it doesn't have to be that way. And I think the officials, God bless them, they do the best they can. They're there for the love of the game. They're there for the kids, and we got to do a better job as fans of treating them with the respect that they deserve. And the school's definitely protecting our officials. So. And
if I could share, we had one of our counties, one of their basketball coaches got ejected, for arguing with an official and wanted to appeal it. I can't remember how long the suspension was. Might have been a year. And, came to us with a corrective action plan. And what they did, I can't remember, it might have been a game, 2 games, whatever the suspension was, but they made their official, or their coach, head coach, officiate a middle school basketball game.
That's awesome.
And they put him on the middle school that had the worst fans that were just, and actually the county AD went to the game and told the fans, heckle him, give him a hard time. And they've never had any other issues with their coach since that point. Because until you're in those shoes and have to hear it, you don't know what it feels like. And almost wish there was a program where if a fan got out of hand and got tossed, that we could have, before they come back to the game, they had to go officiate the game. Just to get a taste of what it's like on the other side. And it's not as pretty as people think it is.
I mean, it's split second, things happen. You're like, well, I didn't. And it goes on, and then something else happens, and then it just kind of builds on each other.
Even thinking about our jobs. On our jobs, there's nobody that we perform in public and get criticized for every little thing we do on our jobs. You know, there's very few people that could handle that type of pressure in those type of situations.
Well, Craig, we appreciate you sitting down with us today here at Coach Red and Company podcast. Thank you for your insight. We look forward to kind of building this relationship and using you guys as resources for things and topics that we're going to talk about in the future. So thank you very much.
Coach Red, appreciate you and look forward to continue to work with you.
Thank you very much, Craig.
All right, thank you.
Back to you. All right, everybody, welcome back. Great interview with Craig. Was super excited that he was able to sit down with us for a few minutes and talk about all things in the state of high school athletics. And what did you think of what he had to say?
Well, first things first, Red, I will say this. Hey, people out there listening, Coach Red is, if you don't know, I call him the mayor because the guy knows everybody and anybody and everybody. He'll shake hands. He'll kiss babies. He'll do whatever it takes. To get on the executive director of the FHSAA on our first podcast, dude, I'm not sure. He lost a bet to him. I don't know. But to get that done, Red, super impressive. It just lets people know that the quality of guests we're going to get on this show is going to be phenomenal. So great job, Red, getting that guest on. As far as Craig goes, I saw some things. Love the interview. The transfer part that you got into with you was very, very interesting. As you said, we're kind of old school a little bit, where the rules were a little different. The follow me rule that he mentioned, and how now kids can play for a coach and follow him in. And the 2 or 3 boys that left their team 9 games in and then sat out 5 days and played against the rival in football. I mean, I don't know what you think there, Red, but I mean, I'm the old guy. Yeah. So with the transfer rules, I get it. 2015, school choice came into play.
2015 school choice came in, which allowed kids to transfer. And the legislature
a lot of unintended consequences happened.
A lot of unintended consequences. I think the state legislature set it up where kids could be able to transfer for academic reasons to get a better opportunity, whether it's a magnet program or a specialized program. But I don't think, which hopefully make these different schools and school districts amp up their academic.
Their academics.
Put more money in the
That's
academics.
the law. That's what it was created for, I'm sure, right?
What it was created for. And I don't think a lot of them, understood that, you could have a situation like the football players that left their school after week 9. They, kicked out of the school. They go and they sit out 5 or 6 days, whatever the rule is. They continue to play into the end of the season in the playoffs and play their former school and beat them. I don't think the legislature had that.
And hey, Red, let me be honest real here. I'm going to be honest with people. I keep it real because I've been there. I've done it. My son, he goes to college. He plays basketball at a small school that I went to in Iowa. Got lucky. He was one of the kids that, one of the small percentage of kids that moves on to play college sports because it is a super small percentage. I'm sure Red's got the percentage in front of him. It's low.
Yeah.
For kids to move on to play any level of college sports, it's tough. Well, my son went to a charter school, and then he went to a private school. And then his senior year, he went to a baseball academy, and I homeschooled him through Florida Virtual School, and he played basketball at a different private school. So if I throw stones, hey, I'm living in a glass house, friends, because I've seen it. So if I say anything that borders like, Shane, what are you talking about? Your kid did it. You know what? My kid did do it. He went to a baseball academy where they practiced baseball 4 hours in the morning. They ate lunch. They practiced baseball. They played junior college teams. They played post-grad teams. They flew to Atlanta and played in tournaments, all while he was doing Florida virtual school. And then during the basketball season, he'd leave baseball at 3 rather than 3:30, drive to the private school he was at, and played basketball because as a homeschool student, you can technically play the sport at your home school, which would have been Dr. Phillips. I live in Dr. Phillips. Or you can play at any private school that'll allow him to play.
Right.
Now, some won't, some will. Now, I didn't have to pay any tuition. I only had to pay the athletic fee.
Right.
So just letting you know, people, when I'm talking about what I'm talking from a little experience as far as my kid did bounce around. So if I tell you don't do that, remind me, Shane, don't be telling me don't do that because you did it.
Right.
And everyone's different, right? Everyone's different.
Well,
everyone's situation in life's going to be different. So I just wanted to preface that, Red, by saying that I understand, and I probably played the system a little bit myself.
And, again, I'm not here to judge anybody for what they do. I firmly believe that, if a kid goes to 4 different high schools or 5 different high schools within his high school career, I don't think we're doing any justice for that kid.
My kid went to 3, so
I think it sets kids up for failure later on in life where it's easy to quit, move on because they didn't like, what the coach said instead of, that perseverance. I got a thing, resilience and resolve. I don't think kids have that. I don't think as parents we give that to our kids or make them. I'm an old school guy. My daughter, the youngest one, played. She was a varsity starter for volleyball her freshman and sophomore year as a middle. She's only 5'8", 5'9", so we said, hey, you need to play on the right side. Well, coach didn't want her to play on the right side because she had a girl that she thought was better, gave her no opportunity, and she basically set the bench for her last 2 years. But she wanted to be a 4-year varsity player,
right,
like her sister was, and go up on the board as a 4-year varsity player. So, could we have left and went somewhere? Sure. But, I'm teaching you to deal with people that may not like you or appreciate what you bring to the table every day.
Right.
And that's going to be part of life. You're going to get a boss or a coworker that doesn't appreciate what
absolutely.
you do. But you know what? You still got a job to do to go in there. Your teammates are still counting on you. And I think if we're allowing these kids to just go anywhere, and I think it comes down, from above, the pro guys, I get it. They're trying to leave to go hook up with their buddies to create these super teams. And then now that comes down into the college level. And I just got an email from the NFHS this past week on January the 8th, Dr. Carissa Nyhoff, who I believe is the director. And, she was talking about transfers and basically talked about the success of the programs. High school programs are due in large part to the structure and focus on educational values, and you're there first. It's an educational model like Craig talked about, educational based sports in high school. That's the fundamentals that these guys got to have. Now, when they transition to college or, if some of them get lucky to the pros, that's a different business model.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. So,
Red, it's a trickle-down effect. From the college transfer portal, kids being able to jump in it. I saw a kid the other day hitting his fifth school in 5 years. I mean, I don't know to you. Like I said, my son did it, so I'm throwing rocks in his stone house or whatever the saying goes here. But as an employer, do I really want to hire someone that's been 5 places in 5 years? Like that, when I hire that person, I'm thinking, is he going to last a year?
Yeah.
Or is he bouncing for the better job
every
year? And I'm using money to train this guy for a month, 6 months. I spend all my money to get him ready. And then all of a sudden he leaves me. And and that's why I think a lot of people like to hire people that play sports, because they understand that they were with a team for 3-4 years in college.
Correct.
And now you're losing that aspect.
Yep.
And you mentioned, I will be honest with my son. Hey, we played travel baseball. He played travel baseball with the same organization pretty much from 9 until he graduated.
He's
And
not
it
playing
changed
baseball in
name.
college, is he?
No, and that's okay. That's what I was going to go to. When we went to senior year, we wanted to give a run at the baseball part, and he only had a couple classes left. So we said, "Hey, let's go to the baseball academy where you're going to get baseball, and and we'll figure out if you got what it takes.
Right.
Like if you can't make it here, you can't make it." Now, you had mentioned, I remember from your bio, our first interview, you mentioned Davis and Elkins, which I was funny because he had a scholarship offer from Davis and Elkins, D2 school.
Yep.
He had a couple of scholarship offers, but if you're a baseball person, as I know, baseball scholarships are limited.
Yep.
The money that's involved on the Division I level, it's like, I can't remember, it's like 11.2 scholarships for the whole team.
Right.
And there's 30 some players on the team, sometimes 40.
That's
So
going
the
to change
money's
this
not
fall.
really there.
Yep.
Yeah, and are they changing this? They're upping
it's the House versus the NCAA. There's 3 lawsuits right now with the NCAA where basically they're kicking out scholarship limits and they're coming up with roster limits.
Yeah, I saw that for football. I didn't know they were doing that for everyone.
That'll be another show that we'll talk about, but that's going to limit walk-ons and change the complexity of college athletics for sure. But
as you said, so my son went and played basketball, and the coach at the basketball said, "Hey, your kid can play college basketball." And I said, "Well, I feel like he can too." But we've always played baseball year round. So basketball was like, he didn't get seen by a lot of people basketball because AAUIs in June and July, where the big months are, those are huge months for baseball.
Sure.
Like we're in Atlanta, you're in Atlanta for like 2 weeks. You're in Miami for a week. And it was tough. So that's how we kind of ended up doing basketball because the scholarship money was more in basketball than baseball.
Right.
And you know what? He might walk on to the baseball team this year just because the coach seen him and was like, "Dude, what are you doing playing basketball? You should play baseball."
Yeah.
You got to remember, he's in the middle of Iowa.
Yeah, go play both.
It is what it is. So he might do both. Yeah. But saying that's why we made that decision.
Sure.
And that was more of a sit down as a family decision and figure out what's best for him to possibly go to college and play sports because that's what his dream was. And as a parent, we're always going to try to make the best decision for our baby boys and baby girls.
Yeah.
Always. And sometimes that might be transferring here and there. And there's different reasons. Maybe you went to a school for this and then, Coach Red was your guy. Now Coach Red leaves and he goes somewhere else. The new coach comes in. I mean, there's a variety of things.
Sure.
But I am going to say I do agree with Coach Red that, a little stick-to-itiveness goes a long way, man. Showing people that I can go through some rough times.
Yep.
It ain't always going to be sunshine. It's going to be, in the coaching world, we talk about peaks and valleys.
Yep.
And I know Red knows peaks and valleys. Hey, you can't be too high when you're high and you can't be too low when you're low. You got to try to stay even keel.
Yep.
Because in life, 1 year, 2024 was the best year of your life. 2021 might have been the worst year.
Right.
But it's going to go. So along those lines, but those were crazy, how Damon mentioned, kids leaving, sitting out 5 days, joining teams, changing schools. Like I look at that and I just say to myself, what are we really doing here?
Yep.
Like, are we really looking out for kids? I don't know.
Yep.
Maybe we are, maybe we're not. I can't answer that, but I'm looking at it like Coach Red can't play like football over here and then 2 weeks later play against him. Like, how does that'd be like a kid going to my Hawks and leaving after the 8th game and going to play with Iowa State 2 weeks later.
Right.
Like, what?
Yeah.
Nobody would let that happen, I don't think, even though, you know what? It's getting pretty close to happening. The Tennessee kid literally just left midseason and transferred somewhere. I don't think he can play in January.
Yeah, basketball.
He left the number 1 team in America. He was injured. He was coming back. He was going to be in the rotation.
Yeah.
Like 6th, 7th, 8th man. Number 1 team in America. And bounced in December.
Yeah.
I'm like,
it's
crazy. But it's a new world.
I'm going to get into what this lady said, Shane, from the NFHS about transfers. And she writes, throughout time, changes have occurred in these programs, most of which have been beneficial and kept high school sports moving forward. But often these changes happen due to a trickle-down effect from the college or professional levels. Conversely, however, there are times when change occurs at a higher level, and our leadership must hold the line to the fundamental values of sports at the interscholastic level. Due in part, no doubt, to the proliferation of the transfer portal, which you mentioned, in college sports, our member state associations are besieged by the ever-growing number of transfer requests. While change may be inevitable, transferring schools solely for the athletic purposes is a change that is not good for the future of high school sports and must be stopped. You know, I got a number.
I agree with her there.
When I was with Craig, and we'll talk about high schools transfers and recruiting in another show, but just to give you an idea, back in 22-23, the FHSAA processed 5,100 transfer requests. Right.
Okay.
The following year went up about 1,300 to 6,465 for 23-24. And this year, as of December 16th, when I met with Craig, they had already had or received 5,385 transfer requests, and we weren't even halfway through the year. So transfers are on pace to double over what they were 2 years ago. And that to me is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, and I remember Craig saying that it possibly some of those numbers are because they're tracking it a little better now.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt it's gone up. Let's call an apple. And most kids, hey, we're sports people. They're not transferring because Dr. Phillips has a better math program.
No.
Like, it ain't happening.
Not at all.
They're transferring because they got a better football team.
Yep.
Like, it is what it is. Like, if we're not believing that, then, you know, I got what's the old saying? I got a bridge in Brooklyn I like to sell you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. They're transferring for sports. It's always going to happen, no matter what. Back in the day, it happened. There was different ways around it.
Yep.
There's always been different ways to get it done.
Yeah.
But now they've made it pretty much like there's no. It's like you want to go, you go.
Yeah.
Nobody says anything.
Like people saying it's the wild, wild west of college. It's the wild, wild west of high school transfers. And I think
pretty much. And me and you talked off camera how when state legislature gets involved, which anything else, it's like when the government gets involved in something they shouldn't have their hands in, people start making decisions that they're making decisions for one thing, and they don't understand that people are going to skew that and take advantage of it over here.
Right.
So school choice opens up, and they think it's for, oh, this kid's super smart. I bet he's going to go to this school because they're great. And you know what? I guarantee you that does happen. 100%. Kids do it for academics. There's no doubt. It happens. But a lot of kids did it for sports, and they were like,
they're still doing it.
I didn't, Coach Red, I didn't know that was going to happen. How did you not know?
Well, I think
that kids were going to do that.
Well, I think the legislators, there's not a lot of people that have been in education.
I don't know.
They haven't coached. They haven't played sports. You know, so I think that's
where
Craig, they're politicians, you know, and I think that's where Craig is trying to do a great job with his staff of
he mentioned
with
Corey
these
Simon.
people and talking to, you know, not only the legislators, but the lobbyists and all those people. And, you know, the legislators got to understand the FHSAA is a great resource. If they're going to make some kind of rule about athletics, they need to get with Craig and his staff and say, okay, let's have a brainstorm. What could be the unintended consequences? It's like the
NCAA need to work together 100%.
With this NIL deal and a few other things, they just throw it out there willy-nilly and don't think about the consequences. So,
and now the NIL deal is even trickling down into high school, which I'll be honest with you, I don't know if that'll ever grip on to a majority of kids. You got to remember, when we're talking college NIL, I tell people all the time, you're talking the elite of the elite. Power 4 schools, you know, the group of 5 schools, you know, the football players, the basketball players maybe are getting a little bit, you know, the swimming person probably ain't getting nothing. The small NAI schools, the USCAA, the National Christian schools, the Division II, the Division III. I mean, there's so many colleges out there. Those kids aren't, they're not getting that NIL money. That's for the cream of the crop.
Yeah,
the best of the best.
Yeah,
the Division I Power 4 guys who were probably, to be honest with you, were probably getting it under the table back in the day anyway.
You know, there's always those.
That's another story altogether.
That's another subject.
Suitcase team maybe showed up. I don't know.
Green handshakes, and guys were
all that
getting a
good
couple
stuff.
bucks here and there, but I talked.
But we'll get into we'll get into NIL a little bit on a different episode. But Craig had some really good things. One other thing I thought Craig mentioned, because he's a small town guy, is how he played for a coach for 4 years, and he knew the coach forever. And that coach is still a guy that he has a big time relationship with.
Yep.
And can reach out and talk to.
Yeah.
And that's one thing you have to understand as a parent, that if your kid decides to, weebles wobble and hop around like the little ball following the song, so to speak, he might not ever build that relationship. And those are relationships that you might not think are, valuable right now, but in 20 years, sometimes they're very valuable. And that's a guy like you, Coach Red. You've had players come back to you. We talked about it in our bio interviews. Guys coming back to me and you and hitting us up, and all they call you is coach. Hey, coach, what's up, coach?
Yep.
They might even, someone might not even know my name. It's coach. Hey, that's coach. What do you mean? Don't talk about coach that way. I bump into people at restaurants, and they're like, hey, aren't you coach? You worked at, I'm like, yeah, well, I played against you.
Yeah.
And it's just so, but if you're bouncing around, are you ever going to develop that bond with the head coach, the assistant coach, maybe as in your situation, the AD and other teachers even?
Right.
Like the math teacher might end up being your mentor. The English teacher might be your mentor. But if you're moving every year, you're missing out on possibly those valuable relationships that down the road could benefit you.
I think you're right. I think in our society today, there's so many single parent homes. And I think that coaches play a vital part in bringing stability to a lot of these kids, and then when parents allow them to jump because they may not have as much influence, they're working to support the rest of the family or, to keep the lights on or whatever, they don't truly understand, and they just listening to, the handler or, the kids say, oh, I need to go over here for this to help me out. Okay, well, whatever, and they don't truly understand the impact that teachers and coaches have on kids. And, being blessed, even coaching at a school for 2 years, I was able to build a lot of those relationships like we talked about.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the key things for kids sticking around for sports. I really believe that. So this whole transfer thing, if I look at the state of high school athletics, I think the transfers and the recruiting that goes on, from school to school is probably the two biggest issues from my point of view that's affecting high school athletics today.
Yeah, it's not going down. Once the worm's out of the can, he's not going back in.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. We'll continue to follow it as we do this show and just kind of see what happens. I'm with you. I don't think NIL is going to be that big of a deal. I can't see a corporation, dropping 6 figures, 8 figures, on little Johnny down the street.
Maybe the local sub shop maybe puts your picture up and gives the team free subs. Yeah. Like something like that.
Yeah.
Which is what NIL should be. Like you put a picture of the superstar player up on there and he's got a sandwich like this, and you give the team comes in, they get pregame meal there because you put Johnny's picture up.
Yeah. Well, I know
maybe it draws some attention to your school.
The one kid locally here in Orlando that I know is a wide receiver at Jones that's going to the University of Florida. He does have an NIL deal for about, I think, around 50,000. If I'm not mistaken, the number.
From who?
From a car dealer. I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
I did an interview with Buddy Collins.
Possible Florida booster.
Unfortunately, we had a user error, technical issues, and didn't get the audio on it.
We're new. It happens.
Buddy did say, one of the positives about all this transfer and bouncing around, it has allowed teams in Central Florida to become nationally recognized and ranked.
I believe
i.e. Oak Ridge basketball, Jones in football.
Yeah.
So, some teams, even on the girls' side, Dr. Phillips has had, an amazing run.
Awesome.
I
know the coach over there very well for the women's team. JT's.
Having an amazing year as a freshman at Georgia.
She was a baller.
But, to be able to have these kids transfer in if they stay and create these teams, that is a benefit, I guess, being nationally known in Orlando.
That's when you're looking at the positives of it somehow, right?
If you're trying to put a positive spin on it.
You're trying to figure it out. And the NIL that you talked about, you got to remember that the young man at Jones, that's a Florida commit. So that's what do we say? That's a Power 4, a lot of money. school.
But and I don't know if that's
not
from the Gainesville area.
That's not USC upstate.
Right. I don't know if that's from the
USC
Gainesville
Aiken.
area or if that's from a local, car dealer here. But there's not many.
And the as you said, Buddy said, it brings some it brings some people's eyes to Central Florida. And you got to remember, in Florida, you got your Jacksonville, your Tampa, your Orlando, and your Miami, your 4 big areas, right? But you get out into this Florida, it ain't nothing but small towns.
Right.
Right? Them are small town boys and
Panhandle.
girls. And they stay on their team.
Right.
Like they're old school. They if they grew up in where's your wife from again? Niceville.
Yep.
You play for Niceville.
Yep.
They're not going to drive 20 minutes away and play because that's not how things work out there.
Craig said, you'd rather go 0-10
I remember
in your
that.
school colors than go across
10-0
town
on
and go
theirs.
10-0 in their colors. And that's the way it
100%.
was when we grew up. So,
but in the cities, things change because Dr. Phillips is literally 3 miles from Olympia. Olympia's 4 miles from Evans. Evans is 2 miles from Edgewater.
Right.
Edgewater is 3 miles from Lake Brantley. And you can go to your choices to play basketball. I tell people, you want to play sports in Orlando, you can find a school.
We have, I think it's 21 or 22 public schools in Orange County.
Yeah, I feel like it probably happens in the city atmosphere so much more because it's something you can get a hold of, right? Like it's right there. It's so easy to do.
Well, hey, appreciate it, Coach. I really enjoyed talking. I had a great interview with Craig and just, as we get through these things, we got 10 great topics for the first 10 shows lined up. So when we get those going, but hey guys, if you like what you've heard, please subscribe down on our YouTube channel, leave a comment, share it, like and share on your favorite podcast platforms. We appreciate it. Here at Coach Red and Company, we just want to provide you with an inside look into high school athletics. For Coach Shane, I'm Coach Red. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Be good.
This has been Coach Red and Company, the premier podcast that takes an inside look at high school athletics like you've never heard before.
Touchdown!
Both Red and Shane are veteran coaches, and their passion is high school sports and going beyond just the X's and O's. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube at Coach Red and Company. Email us at coachredandcompany@gmail.com.